Hello everyone, Chaz in Omaha here with another build guide for last Epoch. Today's build centers around a new relic, the Soul of the Mountain. This relic focuses on the Druid Spriggan Form and converts its normally somewhere between 4 and 7 shot Spirit Thorns into up to a 17 shot screen clearing cannon. Obviously, a 17 hit shotgun sounds quite powerful, but there's a lot more value to it than just getting over double the hits. With the help of the Druid passive Rageborn that gives 3 rage per crit, plus the unique gloves rule of the Simoon to summon tornadoes, we can take full advantage of the Gathering Storm node that consumes 1% of your current mana to gain 3% more damage per 10 current mana. Let's go over what the standard gameplay is like. First, you summon your little GROOT. This guy gives you an additional 8 flat crit, caps your crit avoidance, gives about 15% dodge in level 100 areas, 15 flat spell damage, and heals you for a little bit. He does basically no damage, he's here as a cheerleader only. Next, you become GROOT. Spriggan Form allows you to fire your Spirit Thorn cannon and summon healing totems. It also gains you quite a significant amount of flat armor and percent armor. Then you stay in GROOT form until you log out, die, or are forcibly unshifted by going to town. You want to make sure and put down healing totems from time to time, both for free healing that has a very large range based on my testing, but also you are likely to have some idols that require you to have some type of totem existing somewhere. Lastly, you run around at somewhere between 70 and 120% increased movement speed and just blast stuff with Spirit Thorns. Spirit Thorns will easily keep you at max rage all the time while shredding armor, physical res, summoning tornadoes all over the place, and maintaining as many Maelstrom stacks as possible. What are some of the strengths of this build? I found it extremely satisfying to fire the Spriggan shotgun with 12 to 17 projectiles every shot. Each shot has a nice thunk sound to go with it too. You barely have to aim, the Spirit Thorns are naturally homing and pierce most of the time. Mana does not exist for you once you have the Rageborn passive online. Clear speed is fairly high as each shot can kill a whole pack of weaker things, and your move speed is consistently very high if you have at least tier 5 or higher cast speed on your staff. Healing totems also heal for quite a lot, which means that you have pretty decent sustain even when you're dodging boss mechanics. What are some of the weaknesses of the build? Well, Spriggan Form has no actual movement skill, but it's so fast in this build most of the time that barely matters. The only time you're really going to feel that is if you get slowed and chilled. Prior to at least tier 5 cast speed on your staff, it is very difficult to maintain 6 stacks of Maelstrom, which ironically also makes it harder to continue to maintain 6 stacks Maelstrom. It has fairly one-dimensional gameplay, which can be a good thing and a bad thing depending on the person. Forging Halvar set staff and boots is somewhat cumbersome, particularly the staff, as you actually care about the tier of the set affix. This build also requires the relic and gloves to function well. I could not recommend playing this build to someone without these 2 items. Alright, let's go over the skills in the build with some suggestions on the order you should put points into them. So starting off, we have Summon Thorn Totem. This is what I'd recommend starting at the very beginning of the game with. It allows you to go ahead and start getting the attunement that you want, and you can use a staff right from the beginning because staves have 2 different suffixes that give flat spell damage to your Thorn Totems. I would just go ahead and spec into the Ancient Power and On Astral Winds one so it just gets more damage. You can also play around with having more than 2 totems along with the mana refund and the efficiency if you prefer to go that route. This skill can be completely unspec'd once you get either the Leaf Neck on or you get the Rageborn at the 8 out of 10 so that you have infinite rage and you'll never have to fall out of Spriggan Form in order to bother using this. Although when you are able to spec your 5th skill at level 50, you might temporarily want to respec into this just because Tornado is completely useless until level 72. For the 2nd skill, while you're leveling up, I would suggest Summon Wolf. He gets benefit from one of the staff affixes that you're going to want to buff your totems with. I would go ahead and go into Savage Hunters and Legendary Bite, and then go to On the Hunt. By the time you're not done with this, you'll be done with the dog. Also, when you first get Maelstrom, you can go ahead and probably weave this in a little bit once you have your totems down just for a little bit of extra damage if you have like enough mana regen to deal with that. So right as you're able to, you're going to want to spec into Spriggan Form, and this is when you're going to start playing the build the correct way. I would go ahead and go directly over to the Spirit Whisperer, max it out. This will take your Veil Spirits up to 3, which changes your 4-shot Spirit Thorns into a 7-shot Spirit Thorns. When you first start out as Spriggan, you do get a Summon Vines ability, and it's very, very strong at the beginning. Not only do they do really good damage, even without any Spriggan Form points into them, but they also give you infinite rage via the Tears of the Forest once you hit level 28, if you can equip this. Once you've got the Spirit Whisperer, I would recommend going into Branchstorm. Around this point, you can put 2 or 3 into Ancestral Calls until you get the Forest neck. This will help you stay in Spriggan Form longer, but it's not absolutely necessary. After you have Branchstorm, I'd go into Spirit Vortex so you can start getting Maelstrom casts while you fire your Spirit Thorns. Then you eventually want to go into the Totem nodes, and lastly you'll go into the Ironbark stuff. The next skill you're going to want to do is Summon Spriggan. I would go directly into this flat crit and crit avoidance thing. This is the main reason you use him. Then I would max out this Aura of Kinship. Now once you've maxed these nodes out, the rest of it kind of doesn't really matter what order you put it in. This dodge node is pretty good dodge percent if you have decent attunement. This is just a little bit of utility, so he roots things randomly. And then these nodes are just to hopefully let him not die, because you just don't want him to die. Okay, and then you're going to have Maelstrom next. Now I would go ahead and go into stack duration 4 out of 4 first. And this sounds kind of weird, because normally you'd want to go right into the Windswept and the Wind Fury, but the thing is that without having tier 5 or tier 6 or higher cast speed on your staff, it's quite difficult to actually even get 6 stacks of Maelstrom. So I'd recommend just going into the duration first. Your mileage may vary, and you may have crazy cast speed right out the gate, and then go ahead and go into the Windswept and Wind Fury once you're comfortable with the duration on it. And then you have a decision to make. You can either go into the Power of the Storm and have it potentially start shooting Storm Bolts out, or you can convert it into physical and get a little bit of extra damage plus some stun chance. This sort of just depends on how comfortable you are with being able to maintain Maelstrom at 6 stacks so that it's able to shoot Storm Bolts or not. Next we have Gathering Storm. The order that you put points into this tree is pretty much irrelevant, because it's really not going to do a whole lot until you have Tornado online, which can't happen until level 72. And by the time you're level 72, you already have 19 of your points, so you could just kind of throw them in wherever. So you can do this basically just in any order, and it really just won't matter. Lastly, we have Tornado. Now, the caveat with Tornado is I would not spec into Tornado until level 71. I say level 71 because then you'll have the skill leveled up when you hit level 72. You can wait till level 72 if you want. Now the order of Tornado points is you want to go right to Frequent Lightning, because this is like the whole reason you have Tornado. And then once you have these maxed, you have a choice to make. You can either go down this aspect of the storm thing for like moving faster and casting faster and keeping your Maelstrom stacks up easier. Or you can go into Lasting Storm and Hurricane for your damage ceiling to be higher. I don't think it really matters which direction you go. I think it just depends on if you value higher damage potential or better quality of life and faster clear. So that's pretty much it for skills. Now we can go ahead and go over some of the gearing for the build. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the gearing. First we have the Soul of the Mountain Relic. One of the 2 mandatory items for the build to function well. Highly recommend you focus on getting a 6 flat crit version. For the LP Slam, I would choose Tier 7 Spriggan Form, Attunement, Health. Next we have the Rule of Simoon. This is the second mandatory item for this build to function well, and it's needed to use Tornado at all in the build. The Stormbolt cast from this is a crazy amount of damage. Pretty much only LP matters on this item. You want to go ahead and shoot for Attunement, Cast Speed, Armor Shed, and Hybrid Health for the LP Slam. We have the Leaf Neck. This isn't really mandatory. It's actually more important early than later. However, the movement speed and the large amount of flat mana that comes with it plus the fact that getting 2 or more LP in this is pretty easy makes it recommended. I would really focus on getting near max roll of tier 7 spell crit in this next, because it's basically the only way for you to reach crit cap without having to put spell crit chance in your staff, which is a really massive DPS loss because the crit multiplier you could get in a staff is much higher than in a neck. For the LP slam, I would focus on max roll tier 7 spell crit, then spell or physical damage percent, it doesn't matter which, armor shred, and health. Now we have the Spriggan belt. This belt is quite optional. The double resistance plus high armor is quite decent. It is possible that a well-crafted Praetorian belt with a sealed affix might be slightly better though. For LP slam, I would say you just do cleanse, physical percent, health, and hybrid health. Here we have the Halvar staff. This is not mandatory to use a Halvar staff, although the set bonus that gives you 20 physical and 20 cold flat spell damage is quite strong. This is the hardest item to get an amazing version of, because you can basically only get the best version of this from a champion through the Weaver tree. Gate staff is very strong because the downside of the increased mana cost is largely irrelevant. Cast speed and the Halvar set bonus are what you want on this. I'm going to go ahead and mention really quickly how it is you get up to tier 7 sealed Halvar staff. First, you find a staff with an open prefix, or you can go ahead and seal an existing prefix to open the prefix for yourself on any staff with a tier 7 affix. It does not matter where it is. Ideally, this staff would also have other stats you want, like physical percent, cast speed, etc. So you might also find these sealed instead of the Halvar thing. Next, you add tier 1 Halvar set shard to the staff. Just tier 1 is fine. Then you use a Rune of Havoc to shuffle the tiers on the affixes around until the Halvar affix is now tier 7. And you just stick it into the Weaver tree on the top left and cross your fingers every time you kill a champion. Then we have the counterpart to the staff, the Halvar boots. These are quite easy to make compared to the staff. You just need an open prefix. You don't really care about anything above tier 1 since mostly it's the set bonus you want. And then we have Titan Heart. It's certainly not necessary, but the DR and health percent is always very good. And you're already wearing a two-handed staff, so why not get 15% DR while you're at it? For idols, I highly recommend you get one idol that is frailty on hit, the 1x2 Weaver ones. It is very, very powerful, particularly on this build, because every time you fire your primary attack, you hit the enemy like 15 times, so the frailty is basically permanent extremely easily. For the other idols, just try and get like health percent, spell damage while transformed, spell damage with a totem, elemental res while transformed, and max mana. For enchants, I would recommend getting full tier 6 or higher of the flat spell damage. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and go over a few key points on the passives so that you don't miss them while you're leveling your character. First off, at level 66 or earlier, you want to make sure and put 5 points into the Shaman so that you get access to Tornado. These points are pretty powerful anyways, so you might want to put these points in sooner. This Focused Wrath node is kind of questionable. It's quite helpful early on when you're a Spriggan to keep yourself in Spriggan form, but once you get the Leaf Neck equipped, it's basically 30% increased damage while transformed, which is like something, but it's not that great. Don't sleep on the natural duality thing. It's very helpful for keeping your Spriggan alive, and you get free flat armor along with 30% increased damage. The Rageborn node is very, very pivotal to this build working, but the 8 out of 10 bonus doesn't really matter all that much if you have the Leaf Neck, until you put the Gloves of the Seamoon on and your Tornadoes are spamming Stormbolts, which drain your mana. This node makes it insanely easy for you to stay at full mana at all times while in Spriggan form, even while you have 8 Tornadoes flying around shooting Stormbolts at everything. Make sure when you're playing your character and you're like online, so you're kind of thinking about where you want to go with your passive next, you don't sleep on the Beastmaster defensive nodes. They're kind of boring and not exciting, but they're very, very strong defense, and you probably want to get them sooner than later. Alright, and that's it for my Spriggan build guide. Now you can enjoy a bit more footage of me blasting with Spirit Thorns and Tornadoes, and thanks again for dropping by, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one, everybody. Wait, are we even gonna see them? No, we're not gonna see them. Whatever. I gotta think about it for a second. What? Physical percent sword. I don't really have a use for that guy. I was like aiming in the totally wrong direction, and the Thorns are just like, no, we'll go to the right place. Don't worry about it.